Hey, what's going on, good people? Welcome back to Training Well Done, your podcast on the what, the why, and the how of quality training. I'm your co-host, Coach Donald, along with
Coach Tim, how you doing?
we're rocking and rolling.
Moving and grooving, baby.
It's Good Monday. I mentioned in the last show that I felt really good playing ultimate frisbee. I'm slowly starting to get the itch to train again. I took off wanting to train ever since I did that half Ironman and like not wanting to take things too seriously.
Yep.
I'm starting to slowly get more organized, more structured. I don't want to put any like a lot of pressure on, but I'm starting to like want to be more consistent. I've been actually doing pretty good the last 2 weeks.
So I was gonna ask, so what does that look like for you? Because, just this morning, we were in the gym together and I was getting the board ready for class. And you came out and got a quick lift in, and I remember thinking, okay, this is probably like the 45 minutes today that Coach Donald has to get a lift in, because it's a Monday, it's a busy day, we got a lot going on. Um, so is that like a good example of what you just said about how you're prioritizing? Like, hey, if I got this block of time, um, let's just go ahead and knock this out.
Yeah, I have struggled with following plans to a T. I've never been particularly good at that. I definitely move days around a lot. So I'm a checklist person. I first of all, as a coach and somebody who understands exercise science, I have a good understanding of what not to do back to back.
Right.
So I feel very comfortable just kind of flowing throughout the week because I don't have great discipline about going to bed. So what I'm discovering again for like the umpteenth time is I do really well training very early in the morning during the 5 or 6 o'clock hour, as do many people. The issue is going to bed to wake up
Right.
to train at the five or six
Right.
o'clock hour. I don't wake up till 7 o'clock. If I wake up after about 6:50 or 6:30, the odds of me getting a good quality training session and drop tremendously, unless I have the evening open, which I often don't.
Right. That again lends itself to like the going to bed early too, right? Because if you're coaching evening classes, you're there. It's high energy. You're getting everything in, and then you don't leave the gym until 7:38, and then that's when your night starts. And then by the time you get to bed, it can get really late. Um, it's interesting that you say you're better in the mornings though, because I'm kind of the opposite
Yeah.
way. Yeah, I sort of, and maybe this is just a function of me being a little bit older to a degree, but um, I always like I always feel as if like I get my best sessions in either mid morning or mid afternoon.
Mm,
Like, and that could be a lift in the morning, run in the afternoon, or vice versa. Like that's fine. But like that 10 to 11, and then that like let's say 9:30 to 11, and like that 2:30 to 4.
okay.
Those are my peak times.
I so dislike 2:30 to 4.
Yeah.
I disliked it in college. I didn't mind it in high school. I disliked it in college. I really dislike it as an adult, lifting at 2:30 to 4. I don't like doing anything productive after about 2 o'clock.
Yeah.
Until about 6, really. 5, I have to do stuff at 5. Coaching track is kind of the only thing that I can really functionally, enjoyably do in the middle of the afternoon. I like mid morning workouts. I emotionally have a hard time justifying working out at 11 a.m.
Yeah.
because well, that's late morning, but that like mid late morning time because I feel like I should be working.
Yeah. You feel like there are other things that demand your time, energy, and
Yeah.
attention at that point,
Now
and
if
then
I
it becomes like a selfish thing to get
Mhm.
your workout in. I get that.
Now if I start working at like 6 a.m. Like sometimes I'll work at 5, 6, especially if I start working by 6:30. And I'm really productive because I'm usually really productive if I start that early and I'm done by 10 o'clock with the main things I need to do. It's much easier
Then
to
there
do
you
that.
go.
But
Yeah.
I usually have meetings. Like I usually try to work quietly until about 9 because 9, especially 10, is about when people start needing to be messaging me about
Yep.
things and or I have meetings scheduled to where it's difficult to like prioritize a workout.
I feel like we don't say this enough or communicate it as frequently as we should, but like just because we're coaches and just because we work in this industry doesn't mean that we don't go through the same sort of things that
Yeah.
everybody else does in terms of like finding time to work out and prioritizing sleep so that you feel good during your workouts, and like making sure that you're eating right, even when you have a busy day that's packed full of like, maybe meetings in your sense or
Mhm.
classes in my context and like private sessions. Is like we struggle with those things too.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely have and do.
Yeah, yeah,
So some learning moments. Over the course of November, I've been doing a lot of studying on like training science stuff. I do this thing where every month I focus on learning something. I usually do it by reading. I'll watch videos and listen to podcasts. And so earlier this month, I was doing a lot for distance running. I was getting ready for
sure.
winter trackside. I've had the interesting phenomenon that as I've leveled up understanding the nuances between aerobic power training versus lactic threshold training and different things about marathon pace running and trying to follow through this and be more deliberate about writing and crafting training plans for the winter, I have more questions to answer as more people are like, So I gave out all these winter training plans.
Yes.
And so that went really well. But I've also had more questions than when I did it a couple years ago when it was a way more skeleton based.
Okay.
Because now I've drafted out basically what I want to do all winter from the workouts, actually more specifically, as well as some of the loads and adjusting that for the different populations. But that's been a really fun exercise, and I find it interesting that as I've really dived into more of the depth of that, I'm also having to talk about it a lot more.
Yeah. What sort of like are you're fielding questions
Mostly
from like
athletes.
the youth athletes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Some of it is because it's two very different ends of the spectrum. I have young kids who are in middle school who like to run a lot, and so trying to wrangle them in. And I think that actually happens every year. I think some of this is actually literally a product of the fact that there's just a lot more people at the gym.
Ah,
Actually,
yeah.
I don't even think this is because this might be a non-issue. This is literally because there's a lot more people there, and so there's a lot more people with questions. And so these young middle schoolers, they're mostly girls, and they like to run a lot. I've had to talk two people out of running half marathons in the last 3 weeks, and that both of those conversations happened in a 1 week span, and another one who would if she could, and so talking them through like load management
Yep.
and crafting that, and then on the other end, these more higher level high school boys who like I'm trying to teach them about load management and understanding the logic model. So like what we're flowing through right now that I've been explaining to them, and I'm going to do that trackside tonight, is we're going from they just most of them, almost all of them, just got done with cross country,
Yeah.
and so understanding the flow from working on running economy and having good speed, especially after they were doing all this longer stuff for cross,
Right.
getting into aerobic power work. All right, when we run cleanly and run fast, now can we run fast for longer periods of time? And then can we run fast for longer periods of time during fatigue? And so flowing that way into doing a lot of our threshold training
Mm.
later. And so it took me a while to figure out how to like easily say that
Yeah.
in one fell sweep.
Yeah. But that makes, I mean, that makes sense, and that's definitely coherent. It it kind of loosely ties in with what we were talking about with that fitness speed pipeline in the sprint episode, and like communicating that effectively, to the athletes. And I get it. It's hard. They're coming off of a period of peak fitness. And so you just want to like you want to keep the ball rolling, right? You just want to like, all right, great, let's continue to get after it. And like, yes, you do get after it. You just get after it in a different way, so that way you wind up peaking at the right time again. And we spoke about this in the gym um, just the other day. It's like that's what we do when we're building out these programs. Is that we're reverse engineering the whole process and figuring out, okay, like where do you want to go, when do we need to get there, and like let's work backwards
Mm.
from that. Um, and that's also been an exciting thing for me over the past few weeks. As we're updating the adult endurance programming with everyone coming off of their fall season. Um, but we're also so we have a bunch of athletes that have been with us for, let's say, 9, 12, 16 months, who have been training consistently, performing well. They're well versed in a lot of different things that we would do in the gym. And then we have some newer adult athletes starting through the spring race training that are getting ready for Pittsburgh, and like they might be new to the gym. So we're trying to get everyone to like peak performance on the right day, but it looks different for everybody. And so that's the conversation that I have to have with the athletes is, hey, I know you're both training for the same racing event. Here's why athlete A is doing this, and you as athlete B are doing this,
Mm.
right? Just progressing them through those cycles.
So as you look at people finishing their training blocks from the fall races, what does it look like doing their base building as they go through the winter if they're going to do a spring race?
Great question. So the we're basically going back to basics in terms of, okay, let's make sure that we're not putting the cart before the horse, um, just because we're strong. Because just because you can move a lot of weight doesn't necessarily mean that you should. We need to make sure that you are moving really, really well. So, like for example, in one of the sessions this morning, we did have a cohort of adult endurance athletes, and we were working on back squats. They've all done back squats before. They're all reasonably strong athletes that can lift a decent load doing back squats. And I said, dial this back down. We're doing like 60 to 65%, no more than 70% of what you think you could do. And I want you to focus on A, B, C, D, like the whole laundry list of cues to make sure that we have our X's crossed or our T's crossed, our I's dotted. Because now we're in the off season, and that's a perfect time to say, we don't need to hit the reset button, but we just need to go back to the fundamentals and the basics and make sure that we have those really, really dialed in.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I like that, being able to just scale things back and, all right, hey, we need to recover and we need to work on things. We need to train, but we need to let the body recover and you can still train and recover.
Yeah, yeah. The process happens simultaneously. I mean, that's a conversation we had with people coming off of races too. They're like, "Hey, how much time do I take off after my race?" And I was like, "Well, you take some time off running. You can still come to the gym.
Mm-hmm.
Your workout's not going to look the same as it did 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks ago, but like it can still be productive.
Yeah.
I don't want you just sitting at home. There are things we can work on. There are skills that we can develop.
So, a couple of training myths that I want to address in this episode as we talk about, aerobic base building. One, I hear this a lot. Aerobic abilities don't matter for power sports. They don't matter at all. And then that people need to do high intensities to build a base. If you are doing the only sport where having a good aerobic base possibly doesn't matter is like powerlifting. Or if you're doing like the 60-meter dash. Other sports, when you're running the 200, to some extent the 100, obviously to a minimal extent in the 100, but when it comes to like running the 400, any sort of running beyond that, being able to play any field sport, field hockey, soccer, being able to play basketball, you need to have a decent aerobic base because that's going to be your recovery. The better your aerobic base is, the faster you can recover from things. So whenever you do, let me give you a better example. You are outside and you need to go up 3 flights of stairs very fast, or even slow, actually. And let's talk about fast though. You sprint up 3 flights of stairs.
Yep.
You get up there, and you were just fine because you exploded up the stairs.
Yep.
But then you just realize you're out of breath. You can get up 1 flight of stairs, no problem, because that's your ATP PCR system. That
Short.
ATP energy is readily available for those first couple seconds. But let's say it takes you like 20 seconds to get up these stairs, especially if you're not like super fast, because 3 flights of stairs might not be that hard for some people. but you're up there and you're out of breath. Anything that takes you about 30 seconds to do, 20 to 30 seconds to do, and you're out of breath, you're paying an oxygen debt.
Yes.
So you used up more oxygen, more energy than you just had readily available, and you burned it at such a fast rate that your body needs to replenish it. And so your body's always trying to go back to using aerobic respiration to replenish energy. So you do this 20, 30 seconds sprint up the stairs, and now your body is paying this oxygen net back. When you're playing a sport, how well you can recover is in part how quickly can you pay back the oxygen debt. And if you have a really bad aerobic system, you will take a longer time paying back the oxygen debt, whether it's just moving quickly up the stairs or playing basketball.
Right, and I'm glad you said that in a sport specific context because I think that's where it would resonate with a lot of people. Is like in basketball, okay, you're on a 2-on-1 fast break and you're both hustling. You're offensively, you're on the offensive side of a 2-on-1 fast break. You're both hustling down the court. Your partner makes a bad pass, the ball gets stolen, and you gotta immediately switch gears and like run back the other direction. Um, I mean, the same can happen in any sport. I just use basketball as the most readily accessible example. Is like that sprint back is probably not going to be as fast as the sprint up. And say you have to do that multiple times over, that's going to get repetitively slower and slower and slower. That's going to happen implicitly, but by having a better aerobic base, you can mitigate the rate of decline when things like this happen.
Yes. And when you the example you mentioned, well, I'm not gonna use basketball because
Yeah,
people listening.
that was probably not the
No,
best
the
example.
example is fine. Listeners, they won't be playing basketball, so I'm gonna use soccer or like field hockey. I'm gonna try. I don't really play those two sports. We just have a lot of kids that we train that play those two sports. But these situations are very similar.
Right.
Especially, let's say you are like a midfield player and you have to keep going back and forth. The other thing that's important here when we think about repeat sprint ability, that is a quality that you
Yes.
train to be explosive
Yes.
over and over and over again. What can help with the training of that quality is having a good aerobic base because that type of training often involves unpleasant glycolytic work. Glycolytic work, you're like, what does that mean? We talked about it in an earlier show, but it's the type of training that burns in your muscles and it hurts. It's the type of stuff that makes you throw up. It's the heat in your legs from all the acid buildup and the waste products when you are doing a bunch of 15 to 30 to 1 minute reps over and over and over again. That type of training, which helps you with having the ability to have good energy metabolism over and over and over again to be fast. That type of stuff is better done when you have a good aerobic base because you can recover from those bouts a lot faster. In a track world, if you have to run 8 200s and you have a really poor aerobic base, you're going to struggle recovering between those 200s. Whereas if you have a really good aerobic base, I mean, you see this with, we talk about the speed to fitness pipeline.
Yeah.
Adult runners, I see this happen with a lot. If you ask them to run you ask them to run a 400 as an adult, they're going to struggle. As they get into their, like, I'm running 5Ks now and I'm running half marathons now, and they get really fit at doing that, not only will they be able to run the 400 and run it over again, they'll actually be able to run it faster than they would have before they started doing endurance training. And it's like, well, why are they running fast? They're doing endurance training. They didn't have the fitness to run a 400 very fast, but now their fitness is up, so they're able to run the 400 well because they're able to and they're able to do like 10 400s now because they can
Right.
recover from all
Right.
of those really quickly.
It's that like repeats, like you said. You can be strong, you can be powerful, and you can be quick, but when you have to do that over and over and over and over again, your power and strength continue to matter, but then also your aerobic capabilities matter more, increasingly so, the more frequently you're trying to perform a certain effort.
Here's your thoughts on this one. People who feel like they need to do high intensity interval work to build up their base.
My thought on that is that they're trying to raise the ceiling and not the floor. It's really just that simple, right? If you if you raise the floor and if you build that solid base and that solid foundation, the ceiling is going to rise with it. If you are trying to stretch that ceiling, you might be able to, in the short term. Like, you might be able to get a little bit faster at performing that 400. What you're not going to be able to do is perform repeat 400s
Mm.
and do them all well.
Yeah, for sure. So you don't need to be out here going crazy. You can do lower intensity work and you'll be just fine building the base. When you are, let's say, running wise, you only need to get, I think it's 60% of your max heart rate is what starts creating the adaptations that we're going to talk about here in a second for your aerobic system.
Yeah.
60% is not very high.
It's not high at all. And take whatever you think a 60% RPE is, and like drop it down to even slower than that. I mean, um, yeah, I haven't been doing a ton of up tempo stuff uh, recently. Been really in a base building phase, and anyone who takes a look at my Strava, I mean, you're gonna see workouts on there that are like an 11:30 pace. Now that happens for a bunch of different
I'm
reasons.
about to
Like,
say,
and well, I might be running to meet a client. We go on a run together, and then I go back to the gym, or like I don't stop my watch at stoplights. Mostly because I just forget to turn it back on again. At least once a week. So I just hit the start button and let it ride. But I don't want that to make people miss the point. Is that like your easy runs um, could probably be easier than easier than easy, and you can still get some benefit from it.
that's the other thing that I have to have conversations with young athletes about is your easy runs should be easier.
Yep.
They run them too fast, and it's just a learning process. I don't think that battle's ever going to
No, no, but they'll grow into it. It's maturation with all of us. I mean, even with adult athletes, I have to talk them down a little bit. And I was joking with someone the other day. I was like, when you hire a running coach, you you hire them because you need guidance, you need structure, you need program design, you need a little bit of accountability and encouragement. And after you've been working with a running coach for 9, 12, 16 months, 2 years, you realize their better value to you is telling you when, where, and how to slow down or take a friggin' day off every once in a
Yeah.
while.
Oh yeah. Also, there's nothing wrong with running an 11:30 pace. It's just for Tim, that's a painful pace. Now, what base building actually means? So this is part one of our running series about training for speed development for runners, particularly long distance running. But I want to use this episode to really address base building kind of across the spectrum of sports because it's just so important. First of all, it's not just simply running slow. You're building up the metabolic, the muscular, and physical structural systems that'll allow you to handle hard stuff later.
Yes.
It's better to learn complex drills and different things. Let's say I keep coming back to basketball. I don't want to. I didn't play basketball, but it's easier to
It's in
learn
your
how to do
head now.
complex, layups if you have the fundamentals of doing a layup well and being able to shoot well. You can handle higher threshold work when you're running when you are good at running and have the structural ability to handle the load. Um, so whether you're a sprinter, you're a team sport athlete, you're an endurance athlete, you need some level of aerobic development. Depending on where you are in your sprint journey, if you're like some really elite 10-3, 15-year-old, like, you probably don't need as much. But if you're a kid out here running like 12-5, and especially as like a high school boy or some girl running like 14-3, like you're going to benefit by having some level of increased aerobic development so that you can handle more training to get faster because you're going to need more reps and you need to be able to recover from those reps because developmentally as a high schooler if you fit into those two ranges, at least in my experience, in my opinion, you're not as athletic as the people who are a lot faster, and some of that athleticism is going to be gained, yes, by just doing very full
Sure.
speed reps,
Sure.
but also being more fit is going to make you faster. Um,
Yes.
the fitness helps with speed development if you are not overtly fast. At least in my experiences, I'm starting to also accept that more and more.
Yeah, I would echo that same sentiment, right? Like fitness should come first. And in this context, an aerobic base is what we would define as quote unquote fitness,
Yeah,
right? Faster comes later. Um, Not to go off on a tangent, but you said you keep coming back to basketball, and one of the examples I used was basketball. Um, I know Coach Leslie has an athletic history with basketball. I'm wondering if that might be a good member event, is to like reserve some court time and do like a 3-on-3 type tournament.
that would be
That
fun.
would be fun,
I
right?
would practice for that.
Especially now that it's like the winter, we're gonna be stuck. We're gonna be stuck inside. Um, maybe we could find a gym, block off 2 hours, and try and recruit some people to go shoot some hoops.
Let us know, y'all, especially if you're members at GHP. Would you be interested in a 3-on-3 basketball tournament or any sort of whatever on whatever basketball tournament? That would be
Yeah,
fun. Yeah, that would be awesome. So as a sprinter, the type of aerobic development you need is different than somebody's running a 5K.
of course.
It's fundamentally very different. You might run a bunch of short 50 and 100-meter sprints or even 200s that are on like short-ish recovery where your heart rate is up during the whole duration of the session, and those are not very fast versus like you going out and running for 35 minutes. Now, the other adaptations I want to start sharing. Sorry, cardiac adaptations. So let's get into some more sciencey stuff. Some of the things that change with your cardiac system. We're going to talk about the cardiac system, metabolic changes, as well as tendon, bone, and muscle changes.
And I'm glad that you have those in that particular order, Coach, because I think that's kind of the order that everyone thinks of them in, but sometimes people might get all the way to that end of the spectrum, right? Like the first thing they think of when they think about base building volume, at least in the endurance world, is the cardiovascular component.
Yes. So with that cardiovascular component, stroke volume increases. Stroke volume is essentially how much blood this left ventricle is going to pump out and squish every time your heart beats.
Yep.
So how much blood are you getting out per heartbeat? You can get a higher output at a lower heart rate. That's why people's heart rate drops. Their heart gets stronger, so it's able to squish more blood on every squish, which then means it needs to squish less often.
Yep. Less frequently.
Your plasma volume expands. This is something I don't usually think about. So you get better heat regulation, and you get some different gains because you actually have more plasma like in your blood flowing through your body. I never really think about that.
Yeah, you know what? It's it's not something that most people do think about. But it is really important, especially at least for me and my background and the world of distance running. When you're out there for longer periods of time, like you're obviously experiencing different conditions, but when you're racing and you're out there for a longer period of time operating at higher intensity levels, the thermoregulation component is huge. Like we have like you you can only get so far in a race before you need to dump heat, right? Like I just to share a quick example, in my race this past weekend, it was a little chilly out, so I had on some arm sleeves underneath my throwaway shirt, um, and I remember thinking to myself during the course of the race, it's like, okay, I need to like I'm starting to warm up. We're running at a high intensity here. Um, I need to keep these sleeves on until I get to the turnaround point, which was about 2 miles out from the finish, and then I can rip them off, dump a little bit of heat, and then I can consequently run a little bit faster, right? So that I'm not sure how I'm going to tie this all back in with the plasma volume, but um, I think just to provide a real world example of like why the thermoregulation can be important, and the fact that aerobic base building helps develop this plasma volume and then consequently helps with thermoregulation is an important quality, but it is often underlooked.
Is this why the faster we get, the less clothes we wear?
Um, I can't answer that for sure, but I imagine that it has something to do with it. Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
find that my cold tolerance is so much higher when I'm in really good aerobic shape.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Stands to reason. I mean, like if
It might also just be because it's more comfortable to run
to
fast.
run in less clothes, I would imagine it's definitely a combination of of the two. Um, there's also, I mean, it when you're running at higher intensities, you're just creating so much heat.
That's
It's just
also a good point.
it's got to go somewhere. If you're wearing a jacket, you're just gonna burn yourself up, right? So
Yeah, I wear more clothes for slower and shorter runs than I will for faster runs or not necessarily longer runs, but definitely faster runs.
yeah, definitely
Work out.
faster.
That makes a lot of sense. Some other changes. So there's cardiac output that goes up. Cardiac output is a message of message. Sometimes I just use words that don't exist for the right reason. Is a measurement of how much oxygenated blood you're getting out in a minute. Is a measurement of time. So that also increases by way of the fact that your heart's stronger. Metabolic changes now. A few things. Your mitochondrial density and quality improve. You have a better breathing efficiency because your breathing muscles actually have better endurance. So your diaphragm and these different muscles in your ribs. Your capillaries expand. So you have more capillaries through your muscles. So as you do aerobic training, your muscles, there's more blood vessels, quite literally. And then your ability to use fat efficiently, as well as being able to use glycogen well, those things improve. As we dive into that, mitochondria, it's the powerhouse of the
The
cell.
powerhouse of the cell.
I
We had to say that. This was unplanned. Somebody at the gym the other day was saying that we referenced mitochondria without saying the powerhouse of the cell, and they were very disappointed. So there you go, Dan.
I'm looking to make entire episodes about mitochondria because
Yeah,
it's a fascinating
yeah.
organ. And if I recall correctly, excuse me if I'm wrong, but I think I got this somewhat right, at least to say it in a very basic way. That part of life, there was like the single cell organism,
Right.
and something about how mitochondria was its own organism and like they merged together or something like that.
Um,
And like mitochondria merging with other cells is what really helps propel life.
it accelerated the process, yes, and I'm struggling to remember now when and where I read this, but it was something similar in this sense, and it had to do with like algae. Um, but it was similar in the sense as like that was like the spark, like the fire was built, the kindling was there, everything was ready to go, and then that was the spark that it needed. I'm not a chemist, I can't speak to that, but what you're saying does sound extremely extremely familiar.
Super quick Google search with the Google AI. So this may not be completely accurate, but I think it's good enough. There's a process called endosymbiosis, and it says that somewhere around 1.5 billion years ago, an ancient archaeal cell, don't know what that is, engulfed the bacterium, which was not digested but instead lived inside the host cell and eventually evolved into the mitochondrion. It said that the symbiotic relationship, the bacterium was good at producing energy from oxygen and began to provide this energy to the host cell. And so this mutual benefit developed into a symbiotic relationship. And over generations, the two organisms became so intertwined that the bacterium became a permanent part of the host cell, evolving into the mitochondrion we know today. That sounds like such a cute story.
It's like the first love story.
The first, the first love story. That's hilarious. So, your mitochondrial density and quality improve. And if you're untrained or just, are out of shape, you get a lot of this because usually the mitochondrial density that is something that gets focused on when you start doing faster, higher intensity levels of training, like threshold training or aerobic power training. And so you get your mitochondria helps with glycolysis. It helps with aerobic respiration, breaking down fat cells, and so you're able to get better use of lactate. So we hear everybody talks about lactic acid, lactic acid. The body has lactic acid for barely a split of a second, and then it immediately separates. And you have hydrogen ions, which technically is acid. If you remember from chemistry class, HCl and all the other acids that I can't name, the hydrogen is what makes it an acid. And so that acidity builds up, and your body's making the baking soda to get rid of it. But your lactate is actually sugar. As you train and do your endurance work, your body gets better at taking that lactate, sending it through your bloodstream to your liver to get made into more glucose. Being able to do this sort of aerobic base building is going to allow you to better do that, as well as have less waste products. Yeah, like I said, your diaphragm's a muscle. These Your intercostal
Yep.
muscles, these are all muscles,
Yep.
and those get more fatigue resistant, so they can handle all that breathing, so that breathing doesn't feel so hard. Something that I don't think we think about enough.
Well,
I don't.
the I bet you if you ask 9 out of 10 people, um, you know, if their breathing feels better after a workout, whether that workout was hard and or easy, um, 9 out of 10 people would say yes. But it's something you might have to point out to them for them to notice. Um, but it has a direct impact, not just compounding effect over the long term, but even like just pre versus post.
Mm. Mm.
I like it. I always feel better, especially after I always breathe better, especially after a harder workout.
I don't think I've ever thought about that. I'll think about it next time. I'm like sitting here like, hmm. So, other things that change, right? So we talked about um, cardiac adaptations, metabolic changes, tendon, bone, and connective tissue. So your tendons thicken, they stiffen, and they're able to handle the better loading. Let me say this with a better cohesive sentence. As you run more, particularly with running, your tendons are able to handle the repeated running and load so that your running economy can increase. They have a little bit more stiffness, a little bit more pop and bounce, as well as they are able to be more resilient against how much running you're doing. So that reduces your injury risk if you're able to slowly build it up because their tolerance for all of the steps happen. So there's a level of the collagen fibers are able to align themselves well to deal with that better.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. It's just you're getting more reps in, right? Because you're getting more steps in. When you're running faster, your stride length increases, and you're not, yeah, like you're just not taking as many steps, which is fine because implicitly then those steps have a higher impact um, on your body, right? So when you're running, slowly or easily, you may take more frequent steps, but um, so you're getting those reps in, but they're not. Each one of those reps is not quite as damaging um, as it would otherwise be. So you can liken this to like just doing like a lightweight high rep exercise, in the gym. It's just the repetition, repetition, repetition will help increase that durability. I think that's one thing that people don't necessarily always jump to as well when we talk about a base building phase. Is yes, we're getting more fit aerobically speaking, but we're also giving you that extra time on your feet to be able to handle what's to come next.
Yes. And as you do that, in addition, some of those things like your bones. So your bones are
Sure.
able to better
Yeah.
handle the stress.
Yeah.
And we think about being able to have strong bones, and you got to drink your milk and have your calcium and all that. Exercise is going to make your bones stronger because, again, you're hitting the ground and pounding. And so, as you mentioned, with all the load and being able to build that up, your bones need to also be able to handle all of that. Going from, you see those YouTube videos of people who go from let me do a marathon and I haven't trained for it.
Yep.
And they're probably bedridden for like 2 weeks after that. Maybe not bedridden for 2 weeks, but their bones are so stressed. Some people they get stress fractures in their feet or in their shins because it's too much loading too fast. A part of also shin splints, even outside of technique in shoes, is how gradual are you building up what you're doing to be able to handle that, especially if you don't have great feet equipment as far as your shoes go or in great posture.
Yeah, it's getting the time on feet, right? And the time on feet is going to look different for every athlete depending on where they are and what their athletic history and experience is like. But that's one of the um biggest beefs I've always had with these like couch to 5K programs, or like even worse, couch to marathon program. Like, how about we start with couch to feet first, right? Like, get up and go for a walk, a handful of times a week before you start ramping up mileage for a marathon. Because you're right, like your body just does not have the load tolerance at that point, and best case scenario, after your event, you're going to feel like you got hit by a truck. Worst case scenario, you're going to get hurt getting there.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, and like that takes the fun out of it. Like why be in so much pain?
Yeah, yeah, no,
Like why?
exactly,
It doesn't make you not want
exactly.
to do it again. Like oh my gosh,
That's
it's like
what
having a
puts
really bad hangover.
it's what puts you back on the couch. you know, um, it's again, it's like um, I don't want to go like I don't want to get all heated about this couch
So
two thing right now, but like and there's it's good that you know things like this exist to get people up and moving and inspired and motivated, but for beginner athletes, and not let's take the couch two crowd out of it. For beginner athletes, like you just have to be very careful with introducing more and more volume, right? You will get the benefit. All of these things still apply, even if it's just minimal dosage.
oh yeah. Now, one of the other things that happens is your nervous system actually learns to optimize your landing pattern. This is also something that is good to think about that I don't think about enough. And when you're running a lot, and this could even happen if you're cycling or swimming, where you get to optimize like the flow of the movement. And as it relates to running, you have better coordination for running, which reduces the variability between your steps, so that your running is more fluid and less like gallopy because your body is just trying to be more efficient about it.
Yeah,
And it also minimizes how much energy you're wasting when you hit the ground, so you're able to
yeah.
like actually be more. You're actually be able to be faster because you're like wasting less energy through the
Yeah, this right here is probably the thing that I love most about running.
ground. Really?
Is like, yeah, I mean, just trying to optimize every stride. Um, with all of these things that we've been talking about, right? Like if you go back to the sprint episodes, things about like ground contact time and ground force reaction and things like that. But like I like the fluidity of it. I will tell people it's like even though it is a very repetitive movement, it's just as much a dance as someone dancing because there's so much nuance to each stride. And the more frequently you run, the more practice you get. And the more practice you get, the more your body learns and can figure things out. And so, like your experienced runners will tell you this. They might be out for a run and they can tell when there's just this one little hitch in someone's stride, right? Or as a sprint coach, you could relate to this too. Like that's one thing you probably tell your athletes who are doing some of the distance events to look out for. Like watch that person in front of you and when their stride, like when there's just that very subtle change in their stride, right? That means they might be starting to come unraveled. And so this is something. This is a concept that I really enjoy practicing in my own running, and practice makes perfect. No one's ever going to be perfect, but the more repetitions you get, i.e., read, the more low volume work you do, the better you're going to get with the smoothness and the fluidity of the movement.
You're making me think when I did that marathon back in March in Virginia and how smooth I felt on the first half of that race. And like even towards the end, I was fine until the very end. But that first like 13, 14, 15 miles, like everything just felt so tight and like smooth and fluid from
Yep.
all the training leading up to that. And it was like really fun to just feel that. And as you were talking through that, I like viscerally remembered what that felt like.
Yeah. It's I mean, when you hit a groove and everything's just clicking, I mean, you really do feel like you're flying, right? And I mean, quite literally, you are to a degree. You know, you're hitting the ground smoothly. Your foot's reacting with the ground efficiently. You know, you're propelling back up into that next stride. You're spending a lot of time in the air, minimal amount of time on the ground. Um, and so it's good to have that practice and go through those reps. So to your point, coach, you understand that feeling because then when you understand that feeling, you can take that into the later stages of the race and sort of say, okay, now let's try and mimic how it felt for the first half. And if we can do that, we know that we're going to be running a little bit more efficiently.
Yeah. Now, strength training is the next part, how this plays in with base building. So, it's going to improve the quality of your tendon stiffness and it's going to increase that. You're going to get better force transmission to reduce that wasted motion. So, like just what we talked
Yes.
about with the neuromuscular, the
Yes.
neurological changes, like that plays in with the strength work. And so, as you're able to put that tension on those tendons and they're able to increase that stiffness, you're going to have more fluid running, which is why some of you might notice as you when you run, when you go through running programs while you're lifting versus when you're not, you notice that the running gets more fluid and easier for the same level of effort because you have a lot more strength that you can apply to it, which allows you to actually run a lot smoother.
Right.
Which I know that doesn't sound immediately intuitive, but it's not necessarily about the muscles themselves. It's about the muscles' relationship with the tendons.
Yes.
The other thing that relates to that is going through running economy, which I guess this is all about running
This is all
economy.
about, yeah, at the end of the day, it's all about running economy.
I wrote my notes weird, but it improves your running economy in part because of that. You're also able to actually reduce how much braking forces you have. This is something that I don't always think about. When your foot hits the ground, you I remember Ralph Mann in his book about sprinting. There's a braking force every time you hit the ground.
Correct. Yep.
Part of your strength and elasticity and coordination is in how efficiently you can hit the ground with force in the right direction and getting off the ground quickly so you can reduce the braking force.
Yep.
Because the higher the braking force then that's energy that you're losing into the ground because you hitting the ground is slowing you down versus you need to hit the ground to go faster. So being stronger is going to allow you to reduce how much braking you're having as well as being able to keep your posture. We think about our single leg training episode, right? Being able to keep your pelvis, your torso, your counterbalancing smooth and fluid every time you hit the ground so that that posture can have better endurance. There's something that we don't think about enough with postural endurance and the fatigue that comes from just trying to hold your posture.
Yeah, there's a cost associated with trying to hold posture, which is why posture is important to practice. Um, there's also a significant cost and a significant reduction in performance when you lose your posture, and that goes back to what we were talking about, you know, with the previous episode with moving better and the proper alignment. I think it's important to talk about breaking force in two different contexts too, right? Like for your novice athlete, um, they might think of uh, the negative repercussions of heel striking as being that breaking force, which for them it is. In this context, if we're talking about a higher performing athlete, what we're really trying to do, it's like we've already solved for the heel striking at this point, I hope, right? Like we're not overstriding. Your contact with the ground is pretty darn good at this point. What we're trying to do is optimize the energy return, right? Because we're trying to eke every last little bit out of each footstep, whether you're an endurance athlete or a sprinter.
Yeah, I think that part about getting as much as you can out of each foot strike is something that when we think about racing, There's only so many footsteps you can take in a race. If you are also competitively, you're competitively trying to win or place in a race, or you're looking to just even hit a PR, something you can think about that you don't need to think about too much, but just kind of paints this picture is that you're only going to take so many steps in a race. If you're trying to PR your 5K,
Right.
you're going to take so many steps in a 5K. I don't know what that number is. I don't even have a ballpark for that right now. So I'm not going to try. But there's a certain number that if you take more steps than that, you probably went slower. If you take less than that steps than that, you might have went faster. And so understanding that as you are trying to eke out more and more juice from the squeeze, those steps start mattering more and more and more and more. Think about the difference between running these elite marathoners who run 2:15 marathon and they're trying to get to a 2:10 marathon. There's likely a difference in how many steps they're taking. And so they have to be very efficient about all of those steps because they're likely trying to reduce how many steps they're taking, or at least trying to make those steps get faster. And there's either a certain segment of the race where that difference is really being made up. I don't know if the difference is at a certain point in the race or throughout the start of the race, but in one of those two scenarios, or maybe some combination of that, those steps quality is going to matter. If you think about the 100-meter dash, now that race has around 50 steps. And so if you're running the 100, you need to be on point for all of those steps because you only get so many.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you definitely have to capitalize there. And that's why the efficiency and economy um is like the high like I don't that those are the core concepts. Like um I guess we spoke a few episodes back about like, hey, it took us a while at the episode to unpack um that it was stride rate and stride length that we were really like focusing on. I think with this aerobic base building, it's about efficiency and economy as the two main components. No matter what distance, no matter what race distance you're competing at, or what level you are at as an athlete, like those are the two things. And there's obviously some overlap there, but those are the two things that we're trying to develop with the aerobic base building. And like we said, getting all of those reps in is just from the physical and the mental and the psychological and the neurological, like every aspect, just getting stacking brick by brick by brick by brick is just going to get those reps in and make you more efficient and more economical.
So I want to recap what we've talked about so far. We talked about what building a base actually means. And so that's really building up the metabolic, muscular, and structural systems that allow you to be able to handle the more intense stuff that's really going to get you ready to compete. Cardiac adaptation. So we have talked about stroke volume, plasma, less blood plasma people, cardiac output, metabolic changes. So the increase in mitochondria as well as the improvement of how it functions, the better stamina in your breathing muscles, more capillaries in your muscles. So that's more blood vessels able to deliver blood and oxygen to the muscles. That's why when you start training, type 1 and type 2 muscle fibers start to become more oxygenated. Better ability to use fat and glucose for running and whatever kind of speed you need to do. Your tendons, bones, and connective tissue being able to improve in their ability to handle the load and stress. So your tendons get thicker, your nervous system is able to handle landing mechanics, the strength plus all of that's going to help with that running economy. So that's a recap of some of those main points about aerobic base building and why you need to do it so that you're able to handle the harder things later. If you can, the harder training is going to require higher energy outputs. You need to be efficient at using energy, and you also need to have the engine to handle the repeatedness of doing that. So if you're joining a bunch of threshold runs, let's say you have a workout that's like a 5 mile workout and you have multiple cruise intervals in there. Maybe you're hitting or a 20-minute threshold run. And maybe you're doing like two or three of those in the course of a workout, which is pretty tough. I mean, you might be doing like 8, 9 mile workout. you have to be able to recover in between those sessions.
Sure.
And if your aerobic ability or your conditioning, so to say, is poor, you're going to need more time to recover, which means you can if you have only an hour to work out, you might be able to get less work in. If you're a track and field athlete or a sprinter, and let's say you're a 200-meter runner and it's peaking time, and so you're out running a bunch of really fast 150s or 200s that are like 95, 100% of your best effort, you need to be able to recover in 8 to 10 to 15 minutes your coach might give you after that. But if your aerobic system is too poor, you might not be able to recover. Or if it's earlier in the season and you're running, maybe it's 6 200s, there's a minimum effective dose that's necessary to get a
Yeah.
response. You have to
Yeah.
be fit enough to
To
hit the
get
minimum
there.
effective
Yeah.
dose.
Yeah.
You don't need to go to the maximum, but you need to be fit enough to hit the minimum. And that minimum is going to be different for different people. But if you are not fit enough to train hard, you're not going to be able to do the higher level, higher intensity training bouts that are going to be needed to really get to peak performance.
Yeah, or do them well, or without so much of a risk. What I'm hearing you say, coach, is like you're there is without an aerobic base, there's absolutely no way that you can optimize your higher intensity sessions. You
Correct.
might still be able to get something out of them, but you're really not going to be able to optimize.
Yeah, those serve as poor base building because they're too intense to actually be able to maintain performance levels.
Yeah.
If you're running a workout and a bunch of thresholds, let's say you got a bunch of, I don't know, 90-second reps that you have to do, and coach is like, hey, you've got, 10 by 300 or 10 by 500, depending on like how fast you are, you might not be able to finish the workout. You might end up only running 5 of them on pace. And then you're like, this is too much.
And then
for
you
me.
fall off. Yeah.
Then you're not getting the training benefit. It sucks. And you're kind of just, sucking air. All right. So some coaching considerations. When it comes to base building, you want to generally do a lot early on and less later. As you get later into things, you're going to need more time for recovery. And the adaptations from aerobic training last longer than the training adaptations from higher intensity work. So when you get to peaking level stuff, you lose those gains a lot faster versus the gains that you got from all the base building.
Yeah.
They stay around a lot
Yeah.
longer. So you don't need to do as much of it later on. Also, just managing workload in the competitive season. The load differences are going to change based on your current abilities and your history. If you have kids at the gym, new to doing in more than like 5 to 10 miles. I actually have a kid who's new to running in general as of like August, and other kids are like they're not used to running more than 10 miles in a week. Well, your base building is going to look different than somebody who's used to running 25,
Absolutely.
30 miles a week.
Absolutely.
And so you need to be able to manage your load differences based on that. And then, what does that look like? That's low to moderate intensity work. So that's going to be, you could use a Stairmaster. Maybe some of you are walking. Maybe you're walking up hills. Maybe
Yeah.
you're just doing easy 20, 30, 40, 50-minute runs. That doesn't mean you can't mix in other things outside of that. You don't have to do 6 days of only base training. One of the things that I've grown to really like, the guy who wrote the book Run Elite, what is his name? I follow him. I don't know. But Daniels talks about this a lot too in Jack Daniels' book about having a really polarized training approach. So, and that's what we're doing for Winter Trackside, where they're having all your base running, and then the other running that you're doing is fast, but it has good. It's not terribly fast, not like full speed, and it's all some of it is if you're going uphill, but your recovery is pretty full, so that you're able to do that to work on that economy.
Yep.
And then as you get further down, you're doing a lot more harder training under less incomplete rest.
Yep.
Even when it comes to sprint work, actually, your other days are, you might be doing some light intensity work to just build up your overall tolerance. So that might be doing some 100s, some 150s, 200s, maybe some hill runs. Maybe it's, going on like a 10-minute run. Maybe it's walking or doing some like low intensity weight training. And then your other days are power. So you're doing your top end speed, your acceleration work, short burst, high speed. As you get closer to the season, you're doing a lot more race specific intensities and distances.
and less of the aerobic work because the benefits are still there.
The benefits are still there. I think that's big. That's our episode right there for the aerobic base building. So I want you to think about over your training career, your history for your child or your team. What does that look like for you with your base building, and how do you transition that to later forms of training, which we'll get into in some of the further episodes?
Yeah, and I would advocate for the fact that it's never too early or too late to develop a good base either. I mean, um, it's only going to serve you positively for your training and racing goals, but also just overall like health and longevity and injury resilience and things like that.
Something to add also about injuries is if you are recovering from an injury, you don't need to go back into super high intense training. If you are somewhat deconditioned, your body again will get better from you want to always do the lowest intensity training that's required to get you to the next level. You do harder levels of training because you need to do harder levels of training to get better. But if that's not necessary, do lower intensity work. If you are coming back from an injury, you can do low intensity work until you reap those benefits to then do higher intensity stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Take one step at a time.
Oh.
I did not. That was a terrible joke.
So make sure you download the webinar Strength Training for Runners. That is our sponsorship for the podcast. So if you want to support the podcast, Training Well Done, download the webinar. It covers plyometric training, strength training, how to write and craft your workouts as well. So please support. Um, Also, well, if you're interested in coming to train, you can do that too. And we do offer remote training. Coach Adam, who does our research, does remote training for a lot of our athletes who live out of town. So we have professional ultimate frisbee players, club ultimate frisbee players that we've worked with. We've had just working professionals who, hey, I have a gym, I travel a lot, and so Coach Adam does a lot with them, and he also helps us with podcasts. And then Coach Tim does our endurance training runners. So if you're training for a race, well, if you're in the gym and you're training for a race, we're still going to do that virtually for some of that. Although you have
Yep.
the benefit, if you're in town, of coming to Adult Trackside on Thursday mornings and coming to lift and seeing us and seeing Coach Tim, so you can constantly have that feedback about how your training's going. But if you live away, you also can have a program that Coach Tim is creating for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Would love the opportunity.
Well, we're going to get up out of here. I hope you enjoyed the listen. Please leave us a review, leave some comments, tell us what you'd like to hear next. We want to share with you the information that you want to learn. So, thank you for being a great listener, and we look forward to talking to you on the next episode.
Thanks, y'all.